Justice Scalia's force of personality and his arguments just commanded attention, and people in the area had to take him seriously, and did so because they were serious arguments. And that legacy has borne out in terms of the justices on the Supreme Court. The panel I was on legislative history, the use of legislative history, and Justice Scalia's decade-long attempt to wean the courts off legislative history. And so the panelists spoke about whether courts ought to be using legislative history in deciding what a statute means. And three of the panelists said no, they shouldn't be doing that, or they should be doing it but only in limited ways. And I was the one panelist that provided a diversity of thought, in the sense that I criticized Justice Scalia on this point. I don't think there's a constitutional reason to not use legislative history, meaning that it's permissible to use it. I think the arguments against it that have the most purchase have to do with whether or not the legislative history that's generated today actually reflects the meaning that members of Congress or Congress as a whole meant to ascribe to a statute. My point wasn't that courts have to use legislative history, it's just that it's permissible. And another point I made is that, of course, Justice Scalia used legislative history in the constitutional context and in the treaty context. In the constitutional context, Justice Scalia regularly cited the Federalist Papers, and I think that made sense. He wanted to figure out what the Constitution meant. You have to do that, you have to understand the context. The Federalist Papers help you do that. They also help you have a better sense of what the Constitution would have meant in 1789. My suspicion is that people will be talking about Justice Scalia for quite a long time. And so I think justices are more careful when they engage in legislative history analysis. They're apt to use it less, probably not to cite it when they don't need it. And that's probably a good thing, that people think carefully about the arguments they're making.